Good morning.
Thanks for being here, filling up our 5 days now. It's exciting. We have Reggie online. And we have Nick visiting us again, and Jerry has come back for another visit. And we have our speaker today, Christina, who Arnold will more formally introduce in a little bit. But first, we're going to have a Rotary Minute from Faith.
Make it a long way. You put it in a big.
Thank you, Williston. It's here.
I want something local. Right, somewhere.
All right. So, I kind of, with this is the first time I've done a Rotary Minute, so hopefully I'm not messing up. But I wanted to combine something that was a little bit of local Vermont history with the discovery that I made a few years ago, and it's very relevant to Rotary. So that is that 3 years ago, my husband Sean and I were doing one of our the 251 Club. If you're familiar with it, we were doing one of our 251 visits, and love it. And we're about halfway done, a little bit more than halfway. But we were in Wallingford, Vermont. So you might know where I'm going with this. And I was surprised to see, stop and read those as part of our visits, about Paul Harris. And as a member for about 20 years of Rotary in Plattsburgh, of course, knew all about Paul Harris, and we would have our Paul Harris fellows. And so I read that and had no idea that he had roots in Vermont, but was really interested. So when Elizabeth asked me to do a Rotary Minute, I thought that would be a very interesting little bit of local history for those of us who don't know or would like to know about Paul Harris. So I found out that when he was 3 years old, he and his older brother, Cecil, had been born in Racine, Wisconsin. Their family had moved there, even though his father was Wallingford, so was and multi-generations going back. But his father lost his job, and as happened, and it still happens in families, the family asked older family members, grandparents, to raise the children because they couldn't afford to keep 2 of their 3 children, the 2 boys. So he grew up in Wallingford, small town in Vermont, and was very influenced by the sense of community and support that people gave to each other. So then went off to University of Vermont, Chicago, where 120 years ago, founders of Rotary International, roots and connections in Vermont led to the ideals of Rotary and forming what has continued those same ideals internationally. So I just want to read to you, this is actually from a Rotary website. And I also had interesting information about a walking tour of Wallingford. Has anybody been to Wallingford and experienced a couple of people? Yeah, great little town, but you can follow this walking tour and learn more about, there's still an active Wallingford Rotary Club that meets in the chapel that Paul Harris's great grandfather built. And in fact, when they started their charter about, I think it was like 23 years after Rotary was started, guess who came back and gave the remarks to the 400 Rotarians who were gathered for this. So he continued to be involved right up until the end of his life. So anyway, let me read you this. The path of Paul Harris's creative idea. Paul Harris's childhood and early professional experiences shaped his vision for Rotary. Raised in Wallingford, Vermont by his grandparents after his father's business failed, he grew up in a close-knit rural community that emphasized ethics, solidarity, and mutual support. As a young lawyer in Chicago, he encountered a stark contrast, a fast-growing city where individualism and business competition often led to professional isolation. This lack of camaraderie made him long for the strong community bonds of his youth in Wallingford. His extensive travels exposed him to various professional clubs in Europe and the US, where networking and mutual assistance played a vital role. Inspired by these models, he envisioned a club where professionals from different fields could connect, not just for business, but also for service. In 1905, 120 years ago, he gathered 3 friends and founded Rotary, introducing the idea of rotating meetings to foster equality, friendship, and a shared commitment to ethical leadership and community service. And I don't know, I learned that that's why it's called Rotary, the idea of rotating between those different ideals. So anyway, if you're interested, I have the information about a walking tour of Wallingford, and thought it was just kind of a fun bit of history to share. Thank you.
Thanks, I had heard of that connection, but so always good to learn something new. Arlen, would you like to come up and introduce our speaker?
Follow you?
Sure.
Oh, follow, yeah.
All right.
I'll lead the way.
Way through.
Hey. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's my pleasure to introduce Christina Erickson to you. She's the Executive Director of Local Motion, a Vermont statewide bicycling and pedestrian advocacy, 30 full-time employees year-round and a staff of 20 part-time seasonally. She's been a walk and biking commute since 2006. My pleasure to introduce you to Christina.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me all right? It's really lovely to be here this morning on a beautiful spring day. I appreciate the shout out to the 251 Club because we're actually doing a slight promotion or idea. We're walking and biking in each of those towns. So we're partnering with the 251 Club. So go to Wallingford and take a picture on that walking tour and share it with us. And we're going to hopefully have this whole map of people actively moving around the state because we do work around the state.
Nice.
How many of you have heard of Local Motion before? Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm hoping that I'll share something new with you today, but also maybe this is something that's reinforcing sides for me, and we're going to work together and make this all flow as nicely as possible. Yes, my name is Christina, and I've been the Executive Director of Local Motion since January 2023, and I'm really just so happy to be here today. It's my first Rotary meeting. So what we did, my family, I was sharing with Debbie earlier, with Elizabeth earlier, my family actually hosted several Rotary exchange students growing up. So I was familiar with a little bit of that growing up in Western New York. So next slide. So as you may have known, Local Motion was actually founded 25 years ago in 1999. And the primary goal at that point was to get people across the Winooski River because there was that bridge, an old train bridge there, and then it had gotten taken out. And there was this idea, well, it should go back. So lots of hard work. The bridge, pedestrian bike bridge went back in, and then we shifted this bike ferry idea up to the Colchester Causeway. How many of you have taken the bike ferry before? Oh, good. It's a wonderful adventure. I highly encourage you to get out there. And we now bring about 20,000 people back and forth on that boat, that 200-foot gap each season, 12-minute best ride of your life. So since that time in 1999, we actually merged with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coalition of Vermont back in 2012. And so we've been working statewide since then. And it is our mission to make it safe, accessible, and fun for everyone to walk, bike, and roll in Vermont. And just a little clarification, we actually 13 full-time employees, not 30, which that would be awesome. And about 30 part-time and seasonal folks. And we operate on about a $1.5 million budget. So we have a lot of people, not a lot of money. Yeah, that's a lot, but still. Let's move to our next. And we really help communities build their local culture of biking and walking by providing educational programs for all ages, technical assistance on infrastructure, and advocating for safer policies. And Deb, we can click through a few on here, sorry, thank you. Bike-friendly resources for businesses and communities, guidance and resources for advocacy and community organizing, and services, including that bike ferry. And we generate a significant portion of our revenue through our seasonal bike rental shop, which just opened up last week. And while we've made a lot of progress over the past 25 years, we also have a lot of work in front of us to meet our mission and vision. Some of the barriers we face relate to the evolving nature of development and infrastructure across our state. So in Vermont, we used to have to build a very walkable places as part of what's referred to as the traditional development model, or traditional development pattern, excuse me. And if we had continued in that mode of development today, we would likely still have a lot of great places to walk, bike, and roll. And of course, design and mostly daily needs within walking distance. But life goes on, development occurs and evolves incrementally and continuously, and by which I mean the development of buildings and communities was responsive to economic and social demand in those communities. If a person owned, say, a one-story shop on Main Street, and they were successful and knew there was demand for housing, they were able to evolve that building to maybe include ground floor retail with apartments or maybe offices above. Houses surrounding the commercial area often grew to include commercial activity as the local economy grew. And this pattern is still visible in Vermont's downtowns and village centers today. And I think we can see that evolution definitely here in Williston. What? But what has changed a lot is the areas surrounding our traditional town centers. We've built that formerly rural land into very spread out, isolating pattern of development. But what changed? How did we go from building walkable places where people lived in proximity and in relationship to each other to building neighborhoods like this, separated from the rest of the community where neighbors are rarely seen outside of their houses or cars? How did we go from so many of our daily needs being met within a short walk to needing to drive for practically everything? How did we go from working near where we lived and shopped to having long commutes to work and back? Why do our traditional town centers struggle so much? Why do they look basically the same as they did 70 years ago, just with much more space devoted to cars? How did we go from building places for people to building places for cars? How can we get to this belief of local Vermont streets and roads are for all Vermonters, regardless of their modes of transportation? We need to transform our transportation system. We need to make walking, biking, rolling, and transit, riding the bus, safer and more convenient choices. We also need to stop building infrastructure primarily for driving. So what does it take to get there? I'm gonna pause for a second and shift to types of bicyclists. And some of you, has anyone seen this chart before?
No.
Okay. Because infrastructure is incredibly important for walking, and you can do a lot with sidewalks and good crossings, and that's really, but the key is to just building, having more destinations within walking distance of where people live. But for people on bikes, it can be a little bit different. And so the idea with this image, and this is based on multiple studies, is that somewhere around 70% of all people, just everyone, not just people who bike, but all people, are potentially willing to bike for transportation. But that the 70% that is potentially willing to bike for transportation is divided into three groups. So the first, on the far right here, is the experienced and confident cyclist, which is someone who will ride just about anywhere, regardless of what the infrastructure for biking might look like. This is the kind of rider you might see on the shoulder of a state highway, often in full lycra,
And only about 1% of potential cyclists are this kind of rider. This rider is what we have called a high stress tolerance. They don't care what's out there, they're just going for it. The middle are the casual and somewhat confident riders. Paint infrastructure might be enough for us on certain streets, and we're willing to ensure some sketchy situations as long as our rides are mostly okay. The infrastructure in most Vermont's traditional towns and villages may be sufficient for this type of rider, but we'd really like to see better, more comfortable infrastructure, and we'd like it to be in more places. So I'd like, what's out front here is sort of that type of thing. There's a painted bike lane. It's pretty good. Could be better. The vast majority of potential bicyclists are the interested but concerned, shown on the left. These people are generally not riding right now, except for maybe on bike paths. And the reason why bike paths are so crowded is because these people are riding on them. And it's a much more comfortable place to ride. You don't have to worry about cars and trucks and other motorized vehicles. So if we build good infrastructure along our streets and roads, these people are likely to ride there too. And they have what we call a low stress. The key to success biking in particular is to build the infrastructure that is comfortable enough for the interested but concerned rider. When it comes to building and designing that safe infrastructure that will feel comfortable for that type of rider, there are some fundamental pieces that are really helpful to understand. The speed at which people drive is the result of cues that we take from the roadway and the surrounding context. That includes things like the width of the road overall and the lane widths, how close buildings and trees are to the road, and how intersections are designed more. So while there are always reckless drivers, or might be always reckless drivers, or people on bikes, there's the reckless folks, people who will break the rules. When we see, for example, most drivers going above the speed limit, that's not an indication that something is wrong with the humans driving. It's an indication of that the design of the road is giving those drivers cues that are not aligned with the surrounding context and how fast we want cars going in that context. Things like signage, speed limits, and education have a very limited real effect in and of themselves. It's really about the design. And so here's an example of maybe a little more Vermonty shared street space in very rural Warren Village. Have any of you been to Warren? Pretty sweet little spot. You can see pieces of the street, which are cobbled, indicates to drivers that they are entering a different kind of context. The sidewalks are flush with the street, which encourage people to move from the sidewalk to street freely. Elements like the granite posts give drivers a sense that their space is constricted and that they have obstacles to watch out for. This makes them pay attention and drive more slowly. So here we go to Rutland. And when we have what we call an urban road, which is elements of street mixed in with elements of road design, and it ends up in a bad situation. So the key is that to slow car traffic by removing and narrowing lanes and using that space for walking, biking, rolling, transit, and enjoyment. This will convert them back into. So this shows the two contrast images here in Rutland to show an example of a low-cost project that showed how a street can be, that had road elements in the form of very wide lanes, can be improved to give drivers the design cues that they need to drive at a speed that is appropriate and safe for the surrounding environment. So now I'll describe a few other kind of simple-ish solutions, because nothing's truly simple. If it was that simple, we would have done it and figured it out. But we live in a complicated world. But traffic calming is one way that we can use design strategies to slow or reduce the volume of motor vehicles in a location. And so when successful, traffic calming brings many benefits, which are improved safety and quality of place, increased use of walking, biking, and rolling, greater economic activity, and reduced demand for enforcement. And so a couple specific ways that we can show this are through corridor strategies. And I'm just going to give a couple of specifics on this. There are many different design strategies. I'm just going to give you a little flavor of a couple. Will be just reducing the posted speed limit, which sounds simple, but like anything, it's not that simple. But just as a point of fact, speed limits are generally set based on what's called the 85th percentile speed. So 85% of the drivers are going to drive within the speed limit, but about 15% are not. They're going to go a little faster. Research suggests that drivers will comply with speed limits that are set 5 miles per hour below the 85th. Have to support the new target speed limit with a road design that encourages that speed. In Vermont, for now, the minimum allowable speed limit 5 miles per hour, except within state designated downtowns, which can be lower. Another example is by planting trees and other landscaped vegetation along the roadside in a buffer space between sidewalks and roadways creates a visual tunnel effect, narrowing the driver's field of view, which encourages slower speeds. Investing in street trees and planting more walking and biking in a community. And I can just note about how effective this strategy is for traffic calming alone. It is usually recommended to be part of a more comprehensive traffic program. Next up, we're going to look at a couple of strategies for speeds and creating more comfortable conditions for people walking and biking across the street. So intersections and other street crossings are often the locations that make an otherwise safe and comfortable walking or biking trip so stressful that people avoid traveling to otherwise desirable destinations. In-street pedestrian crossings, you've likely seen these in different locations. They can really help improve yielding at crosswalks. They might also calming effect since they're a physical object in the middle of the road and they create that visual narrowing of the lane. They can be used effectively on some 35-mile-per-hour roads in Vermont, and on 2 of them, V-Trans guidance allows them up to miles per hour. It's a pretty low-cost solution that is quite effective. It's also not uncommon that they have to get replaced a few each year because they get damaged. They are designed to be to bend if struck, and they usually bounce back up. It depends on how vigorously they've been. And then mostly they're usually removed in the winter time. Another option are what we call extensions, bulb outs or bump outs. good bike parking, perfect. So good bike parking makes it easy and so that public realm by ensuring that bikes are parking in an organized fashion so that trees aren't damaged, blocks aren't blocked, and so on. Good location usually means that being as close as possible to and visible from the front door of the destination. Locate bike park high traffic area. Many people around can be a big incentive for employees at a workplace as well. And yet sometimes it's just not realistic to build enough permanent bike parking for seasonal events like farmers markets and outdoor concerts and such. But we have a solution for that. And it's called valet bike parking. And this is something that we've been doing since about 2012, mostly in Chittenden County. And it's great. And we are trying to develop some materials so that people can do these in a smaller scale event or smaller scale way and provide that resource for people who are wanting to do this in their towns. So now that I've shared a few examples of better infrastructure biking, we'll shift to how the impact of these strategies are measured. The League of American Bicyclists is a national organization that offers a program called Bicycle Friendly America. There are programs for communities, businesses, and campuses to rate their success and give them very specific strategies to improve, to get a better rating. In Vermont, we currently only have 4 designated bike-friendly communities. Sorry, but Williston is not one of them yet, but could be. We have 5 bike-friendly businesses, and Vermont's overall statewide ranking lands at number 22 out of 52, because I believe Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia are also included in there. So 22 is not bad, but better. And there's a comparable or a similar program for walk-friendly communities as well from the University of North Carolina's Highway Safety Research Center. And this program does seem to be on hold at the moment, but there are still excellent strategies listed on their website that could be helpful for towns to consider if they want to. And we have 2 current designated communities in Vermont, Burlington and Essex Junction. So from residential users to visitors to Vermont, from transportation to recreational uses, there is positive economic impact from these activities, with much more that could be done, especially by better connecting our recreational assets, such as trails, to nearby towns. And of course, the positive impact extends beyond the economics. As written in the overview of the recently produced Move Forward Vermont report, quote, healthy and vibrant communities bring people together, create a sense of belonging, and improve well-being. They support and are supported by a healthy environment, from clean air and water, to flourishing habitat for plants and animals, and they provide places for people to meet, be active, and share memorable experiences. And it's funny, as I'm reading those words and also looking at your 4-way test, so much of that connects to what I'm seeing here. So the role.
Can I interrupt for just 1 minute? If anybody has a license plate KGW 408, it's blocking some traffic. So if you would please,
It's in the daycare.
in the daycare
We have
spot,
4 spots, and it's in our
KGW blue car.
BMW blue SUV, BMW.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Parking causes challenges all over the place. Debbie, we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So lots complicated image here, but I'm just going to talk through a little bit about, so I have an academic background. I was talking with Elizabeth, I'm the academic doctor, she's the medical doctor. So we get really heady about some of these things sometimes, but so we have this theory of change model for local motion, which is really just a visual representation of how the many programs and services that local motion offers, noted on our left, or on the left in this image, with the big outcomes we're aiming to influence on the right. We'd love to, working towards reducing carbon, building community and sense of place, improved mental and physical health, and increased accessibility, and that positive economic impact I was mentioning. In the middle is the culture change cycle that starts with increasing public support for investment, moving to increased political support for investment, which leads to improved infrastructure, leading to safer, more comfortable facilities for walking and biking, which leads to increased rates of walking, biking, and rolling, and the cycle keeps building from there. So that it describes sort of our why of the work that we're doing. And we track and monitor our progress through our organizational strategic statements and action plans and our annual impact reports. And I brought a few copies of that impact, of our most recent impact report, if you're interested. And even stronger, if you're inspired, there are many ways to get involved. From learning more on a lot of these topics, they're much more in depth through our webinar series, which are recorded and available online. You can conduct a walk or bike audit in your neighborhood. AARP has these fantastic toolkits, and we partner with AARP in Vermont here quite a lot. Or joining or starting a community walk bike group. And actually, Williston just recently started a group called On the Move. And if any of you know Batson, he's leading that effort, and Local Motion is supporting that group as well. So that can be a way to get involved. And then on our next slide, yep, there are a number of volunteer opportunities. Are any of you volunteers with Local Motion already by any chance? A strong ethic of Rotary as well as service. And so we really, really depend on our volunteers to make much of our work happen. And that's through parking bikes at Valley Bike Parking, supporting some of our group rides. We have a lot of shifts out at the bike ferry, people greeting visitors and onto the boat, sometimes cleaning the bikes that go through our youth Bike Smart program. So we've got many, many ways that people can help. And then finally, I'll just say there's also opportunities that businesses can support Local Motion, from financial sponsorships to encouraging employee giving or volunteering. And we love to work with businesses on customizing arrangements that are mutually beneficial. And with that, I will thank you. And if there's a minute or two for questions, I would love to hear any questions.
I just have a question about Kevin, the name of the group that he's setting up.
Yes, called On the Move.
One more question.
Is there currently any legislation which enforces such for like new development?
Yes, many. And actually, recently, I think it was 2 years ago, the Vermont design standards for all the roads that V-Trans builds and supports, which are most in the state, those design standards were 30 years old. And so those are being significantly upgraded. And so the basically the manual for those design standards is being upgraded right now. And then we just had, last year, Local Motion was successfully got passed the 4-foot required passing law. So it used to just be recommended that you give people walking and biking or riding horses on Vermont's roads 4 feet, and now it is the law. And that's about what we say, about 4 chicken wicks. Imagine 4 chicken. Not very practical when you're driving. Think about it. Everyone's like, that no, it's like that far, but
Do we have it dollar bills?
Go too far. So like some people, when they're driving a car, they'll go way wide,
Yeah.
creating a really dangerous situation. It's like, just keep in mind, you don't have to go crazy about it. Like,
4 chickens.
yeah.
And you can cross the line, that's okay, and all of those things. So yes, so we do a lot of advocacy and legislative work as well.
What about local? Well,
Well, I've
off of Mountain Road.
Yeah, I had a really lovely bike ride with your town planner, Matt Boulanger, 2 years ago, and we biked all around to see all the different pieces. And so, that is an opportunity, and I know in certain towns they are including zoning provisions related to making, including walk and bike infrastructure in those developments. So I don't know about that specific site, but, that would be a great thing to bring up with Kevin and the On the Move team.
Hey, we can do one more quick question because everyone's so excited.
Phil has his hand up too.
Go ahead, Mary.
I was just a quick observation. Go to Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yeah.
Every morning, 1 million people get on their bikes and go to wherever they're gonna spend the day. And then at the end of the day, they come back, all the traffic's in one direction, of course. It's the most healthy, happy place you've ever seen.
And it was a dedicated choice to make it that way. It didn't used to be that way. And after many childhood deaths, they said, we've got to do something different. And it would be wonderful to see that kind of choice here. Thank you for that.
Okay, one more from Phil.
Oh, gosh.
So Phil,
I don't think there's any question but what these are noble efforts that you're making. But I think the fundamental problem is we don't have decent housing close to workplaces that are affordable for the people who do that work. And until we solve that problem, you're going to be fighting against the tide, because there's no way that a person who works in a shop doing clerk work or salesperson can afford to live next to where they're doing their work. It's a simple problem, and the problem has to be solved before all these other situations can be rectified. People hurry because they have a long distance to travel before they get to their workplace, and your efforts are noble, but you're fighting an uphill battle. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And it is absolutely, I agree with you 100%. And we are very much advocating for building more housing in town centers that include walkable, bikeable components, just very, very much to that fact, and close to bus lines, and we need the bus to stay alive for us as well. So thank you for that very important point. And thank you for your time. I will yield the mic.
Thank you, Christina. One more thing, if I can get you to select a winning.
Oh gosh, what pressure, okay. Well, lucky number
The last three.
752.
oh,
Auditing. Needed there.
Thank you, Christina. The subject is very well received by the, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are hustlers. We enjoy hearing that. And thanks for you, being here this morning, getting up early, coming to talk to us. We'll make a donation to the Williston Central School Mentoring Program in your name. So thank you very much.
And they have an excellent Safe Routes to School program, thanks to Amy Brewer and many other family members and other people. So that's fantastic. Thank you. And I'll leave a couple of these at the front table too.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate the help.
Thanks, Christina. That was great. Obviously we have a whole list of questions, but I guess we'll have to get you another time. All right, Charlie's gonna give us an inspiration this morning.
Thank you very much.
I'm not sure that I'm a very inspirational person, but a couple stories, a couple of them that you've probably heard over and over because they affected me so much. The first story I want to tell is a kind of a sad story. I was in seminary in Washington, D.C., and one of the students on his last semester was assigned to go onto the streets of Washington, D.C. downtown and panhandle He was given some number of hours to do that. I don't remember if it was 2 or 4. He came back and he said it was the worst experience of his life because people treated him as if he wasn't there. That ceasing to become a person had such a dramatic effect on him. So the second story I want to tell us is one that I know that I've told, that some of you have heard, that I was up with my wife working on a humanity house, the first house that we worked on, and Ruth was working with another woman. They were installing the outlet boxes, and the other woman that was with her suddenly started to cry and said, "Never in my life did I ever expect to own my own home." The third story is a storm-related story, and I know that I've told it lots of times. Hurricane Sandy went through coastal North Carolina and did a lot of damage to a lot of homes, and we got together with a group of a half a dozen or so people and went down, and we were introduced to a family that had $25,000 worth of wind damage to the outside of their house. And because of choices that they had made, this is not a criticism of insurance companies, but because of choices that they had made, they had gotten a check for $500 to pay for that wind damage. And the man was a chief petty officer in the Coast Guard, and he had gotten a job that he hated, and he wanted to retire. And we got there on Monday, and he was a little old man like this. And he walked along and he could just barely get by, and he thought we were a paid crew and it didn't do much for him. And on Tuesday, he realized that we were volunteers. And as he started working with us, by Thursday, he was standing on a ladder, helping putting up siding. And I realized that as a group, we had brought hope with us. But the message that I have today is that the things that you do have impacts on people. That when you smile and say hello to the beggar on the street and give them back their humanity, you have impact. When you help build a ramp for a family that can't get into their house, you have impact. When you plant flowers and bring smiles to people as they walk by the bike path, you have impact. That the things that you all do as Rotarians have real impact on people's lives.
Very good. I think you'd be pretty. All right, we have a few announcements. Again, check your email that I sent out yesterday because there's a lot of important dates in there, but probably most important today is Armin's birthday party is tonight at 5 at the St. John's Club. So we're all invited to come eat his food and celebrate him. Jerry started a new thing at the front desk where if you're wearing